The afternoon my daughter surprised me with a weekend away at the lake, I should have known the water would not be the only thing trying to pull me under. I was sitting at my kitchen table with a chipped mug of grocery store coffee and a crossword that insisted cedar had 5 letters, when Ava breezed in with a paper bag, a bouquet of lilies, and a voice too bright by half. "Mom," she said, breathless like she'd sprinted from her car to my porch. "Put on a sweater. I booked us a getaway. Think of it as a pre-retirement rehearsal. Peace, quiet, no alarms, no responsibilities." I laughed and said something polite about her timing. 67 is late for rehearsals of anything. But inside, I felt a small knock on a door I didn't know was there. I had never trusted surprises, not since I learned as a nurse that the human heart hates being startled. My late husband would say I could find an emergency in a velvet box. He was not wrong. Ava set the lilies in my sink, the stems making a squeaky sound against stainless steel, then hugged me with both arms and her cheek pressed hard to mine. She smelled like grapefruit and expensive lotion and hurry. "Don't pack much," she said. "It's just a long weekend, 2 nights. We have a check-in window." "We?" I asked. "Derek's finishing a call," she said, with a practiced eye roll that pretended our discomfort with one another was a sitcom laugh. "He'll meet us there. You're going to love it, Mom. Cedar Lake. The house is right on the water. Dock, big windows, a real fireplace. I swear you'll forget the city exists." She said real fireplace, like we were pioneers, not 2 women from Albany who knew how to set a timer on a thermostat. I said yes, because that's what mothers do when their daughters finally ask to spend time with them that isn't a rushed brunch. I said yes because I wanted to see who she became when she wasn't measuring herself against a calendar worth of Instagram lives. I said yes because saying no to your grown child feels, in the moment, like a tiny betrayal you cannot take back. I packed my weekend bag with the usual: pajamas, 2 sweaters, heavy socks, the bottle of blood pressure medication the doctor kept saying I could probably cut in half if I'd walk more and worry less. I added the old paperback my friend Nora left me months ago, and a small, sharp pocket knife my husband had carried during 30 years of fixing other people's broken things. When we were already in the car, halfway down my street, I realized I'd left my reading glasses on the kitchen counter. Ava groaned and turned us around with a dramatic swing of her wrists. "Mom," she said, "one day you're going to forget your head." "One day," I told her, "and not before." It earned me the tight little smile she used to wear when she was 5 and had to say sorry to the class rabbit. I jogged up the stairs to my porch faster than I had any business moving, and as I reached for my front door, I heard voices inside. I should explain, my door sticks. Anyone who doesn't know the trick of lifting as you turn the knob will curse, once, then twice, and then simply talk louder, as if the wood itself might respond to volume. The door was stuck, which meant somebody was there. I thought we had left my house empty. I thought I was hearing a radio. I thought 1,000 ridiculous things before the simple truth arrived like a cold hand in the small of my back. Ava had a spare key. Of course she did. And if she came back to grab something she'd forgotten, of course she would take Derek with her. Of course they would talk. Of course I would hear. I stood in the shadow of my own azalea bush and listened. I tell you this with no pride and no apology, because that afternoon I became the sort of woman who does not pretend she is safe simply because pretending feels polite. "I told you it's this weekend," Derek was saying, perfectly crisp, like a man addressing a team meeting. "She signs Sunday morning. We're done by noon. By sunset, we shake hands with the notary's guy, and there's nothing left to worry about. Don't overcomplicate it." "You said that last month," Ava answered, and her voice peeled years off my heart. It was the voice she used when she needed money for prom shoes I could not afford. It was the voice she used when she told me she would not be home for Christmas because they had a couples thing. It was the voice that calls itself practical. We agreed. We agreed there would be no surprises, Derek. If she changes her mind, she won't, he said. She loves you. She thinks the paperwork is just taking pressure off her shoulders. We've rehearsed this a dozen times. Durable power of attorney, the deed transfer, the trust document. And if she gets cold feet, a beat of silence, the kind of silence you could trip over. If she gets cold feet, Derek said again, and this time the words felt like slick river stones underfoot. She'll have a little accident on the dock. It's a lake house, slippery boards. The woman's 67. It will be a tragedy. It will not be a shock. Don't, Ava snapped, too quickly, too loud. Do not talk about my mother like that. Then stop putting me in a position where I have to fix your messes, he said, voice low and dangerous now. I peered through the slit between my curtains and saw him there, back straight, tie loosened, jaw tight. The man could have delivered an acceptance speech with that posture. I had known men like him in the hospital who believed a polished shoe and a chart held like a briefcase could convince a bleeding wound to obey. You brought me the numbers, Ava. You showed me the letters. You got the card companies to stop calling you at work for 1 week. 1 week, so you could sleep. You wanted this as much as I did. I leaned my forehead against the cool glass and asked the reverend voice in my head to please not answer for me. If there are gods for mothers, they live in the space between what we hear and what we allow ourselves to know. Ava said, I never wanted, and then she stopped, like she'd seen the rest of the sentence on her tongue and couldn't bear to say it out loud. We said we'd ask. She'd agree. She always agrees. She always agrees, he echoed, and this time he laughed in a way I would have recognized even without seeing the expression on his face, triumphant, thin-lipped. Then let me do the rest. I backed away from my front door with the care of a woman trying not to wake a sleeping dog. I lifted. I turned the handle. I went inside with a big, dumb show of oops, my glasses, humming to myself like a fool on purpose, and there they were, standing too close to one another for enemies and much too far apart for love. Oh, I said. Would you believe it? I left my readers. Don't mind me. Ava's eyebrows did that quick little dance they used to do when she got caught sneaking makeup in her backpack. Mom, she said, too bright, too fast. We were just, Derek realized he left. Well, it's not important. You got your glasses? Let's get you to the lake before the sun goes down. Derek kissed my cheek. His lips were cool. He smelled like mint and something metallic I couldn't place. He squeezed my shoulder with those lawyer hands. You're going to love it, Helen, he said. We thought of everything. I said thank you. I smiled. I packed my readers in my bag with shaking fingers, and then I did the only selfish thing I have done in my life without regret. I went anyway. You have to believe me when I tell you I did not go to be brave. I did not go to prove something. I went because every nurse learns quickly that you do not insist on an ambulance if you do not know the name of the hospital where you're headed. I needed to see the doc. I needed to see the paper. I needed to see the way my daughter's face would look under the light of a house I did not own. On the way out of town, while Ava sang along to some song about clean girls and cool drinks, I texted one sentence to the only person I trusted with a secret I was not ready to hold alone. Frank, I typed, my thumb leaving small, sweaty crescents on the glass. Can you talk? Frank Mason is the sort of man who speaks like wood grain looks. He did 30 years as a county sheriff, then 5 as the sort of private investigator who takes pictures for wives who already know the truth. He was my husband's best friend, and he does not have patience for theatrics. He returned my text with a call, which I did not answer because my daughter would hear my voice change. I texted again. Family trip to Cedar Lake. Funny feeling. Call tonight if you can. He texted back, leave your location on. Photo any papers. Don't drink what they hand you. Out past the last gas station, the air turned cleaner, and the road skirted a river that couldn't decide if it was in a hurry. Ava took both hands off the wheel to clap in rhythm to the music, then laughed when I made a sound a mother makes when she sees her child reaching for the stove knob. We should do this more, Mom, she said. I know, I said, because there are times you lie not to hurt, and times you lie because the truth would topple everything you're trying to keep upright, and I no longer knew which kind of lie I owed her. Cedar Lake was a long smear of gray glass, surrounded by evergreens. The house stood on the north side in a shallow cove, 2 stories of new money pretending to be old money, dark siding, those floor-to-ceiling windows you can't keep clean, a metal roof that would sing in a storm. The driveway curled down like a cattail, and next to the garage stood a half-built shed stacked with lumber. A man waved from the end of the drive. He wore a beanie hat and an attitude that advertised he'd help you because he'd been paid, not because he liked you. Cole? he said when we got out, like a dog offering you the name of its owner. He shook my hand with fingers that had not held a hammer that day. Mrs. Reed, good to meet you. Same, I said. Cole's our guy, Ava said, unlocking the front door with a code instead of a key. He's been helping us with the dock, the house, stuff Derek doesn't have time for. We all have jobs, I said, and I smiled so she wouldn't hear the judgment in my voice. Is the dock new? Reinforced, Cole answered, before Ava could say anything. Strong enough to park a pickup if you had to, not that you would. He laughed by lowering his chin, not with his eyes, and something about the way he scratched his cheek reminded me of the boys who used to loiter outside the hospital doors and ask for a light. Inside, the house was beautiful in the way houses are that don't yet know your mess. Bare walls, big sofa, a kitchen island that could double as a runway. On the island sat a manila envelope. I recognized a notary's stamp before I recognized my own first name typed in Helvetica. Later, Ava said, sweeping the envelope into a drawer like a woman hiding a love letter. Let's go see the water. You don't get a sunset like this in Albany. I stood on the back deck with my palm on the rail and looked down at the dock. It was simple. A T-shape of planks, a ladder on the left side, a bench on the right, 4 metal posts driven into silt and faith. The wood was new. The screws shined, winking in the last light. A coil of rope sat near the bench, and a white cooler crouched like a dog waiting for a treat. There is a word for when you recognize a thing you have never seen before. Déjà vu. That was not what I felt. I felt premonition. I felt design. Isn't it peaceful? Ava asked. You can hear the loons at night. It's beautiful, I said, and that was true. I did not sleep much that first night. I was put in a downstairs bedroom with a window that faced a stand of birches. The mattress was too soft, the sort of guest bed you buy for someone who isn't supposed to use it. I lay there and listened to the house make noises houses make when they are settling, and the people inside them are trying to do the same. I heard Ava on the phone upstairs, her voice a whisper that rose and fell and rose again. I heard Derek come in late, keys clicking against the kitchen counter like punctuation marks he uses when he forgets how to read kindness. Somewhere around midnight, a car drove slowly down the road and then idled. I learned something important while listening to bodies in pain. There's the sound of a thing, and there's the silence around it. I have never trusted silence. In the morning, I made coffee and pretended I was seeing the house for the first time. I made a small show of admiring the tile, the counter stools, the ridiculous industrial sink. I found the lilies on the table already losing patience with us. When I reached for my medication, it wasn't where I left it. I checked my bag twice. I took the whole bag into my bedroom and turned it upside down on the bedspread. Lip balm, scarf, old movie ticket stub, hand lotion, a quarter, 2 receipts, the paperback, my phone charger, the pocket knife. No pills. Lose something? Derek asked, leaning in the doorway, hair too neat for a morning that still wore its pajamas. My medication, I said, because lying about blood pressure takes a boldness I do not possess. He smiled like a man on a billboard about malpractice settlements. I think I saw a bottle near the sink last night. Could be the housekeeper put it in a cabinet when she wiped down. She's a neat freak. I'll help you look. We looked together while he watched me find a bottle I had never seen before in the far back of the pantry, behind a tray of wine glasses that tried too hard to be thrown. The label had my name on it. The pills inside were smaller than mine, white, not peach. My heart thumped once, hard. Got it, I said, and I put the bottle in my sweater pocket and smiled at my would-be son-in-law like I was a woman who believed in coincidences. When he left the kitchen, I put the bottle next to mine on the counter and took 2 photos, the label of the pantry bottle, the label of my half-empty bottle from my bag, the one I found later under the downstairs bathroom sink behind a plunger. Then I concealed mine under the liner of my tote and kept the pantry bottle where a kind person would expect to find it. Frank texted me when I was on the deck pretending to enjoy sun on my face. "Send me a photo of papers," he wrote, "then sit on your hands." "How do I sit on my hands?" I typed back, "when I need them to hold the railing?" He wrote, "You'll hold the railing with your mind." I told him I was not signing anything without reading every line. He told me the thing about people like Derek is they count on you skipping. They sell efficiency, Frank wrote. Their math depends on it. Around 10, a woman in a green windbreaker walked by on the public path that hugged our cove. She had gray hair cut sharp and kind, a camera hanging from her neck, and a golden retriever who wagged at me like we'd already agreed to a friendship. "Morning," she called. "You must be our new weekend neighbors." "I suppose I must," I said. "I'm Helen." "Nora," she called. "This is Jasper. We're in the cedar cabin across the way. Holler if you need sugar or a spare human. This place is a postcard until it's not." "A spare human?" I asked. She smiled. "Storms. Cell service. Men who insist on cranking boats during lightning. I run the kind of errands people don't know they need." Then she was gone. Jasper's tale a metronome keeping time with a life of surprises. After lunch, Ava got an important phone call she had to take from the upstairs office. Derek went with her, which is not something a husband of a woman in a room with a door usually does. I went to the drawer where the manila envelope had disappeared. It wasn't locked. It never is. People trust their drawers more than they trust their hearts. I lifted the envelope like I was lifting a sleeping bird. Inside were 3 tidy stacks of paper, clipped, clean, crisp, no legalese too large for a person with graduate school on her resume to decode. Durable power of attorney, living trust agreement, quitclaim deed. Cigarette after cigarette of grown-up words that go down harsh but keep your hands busy. The quitclaim deed transferred the lake house to a trust. The trust named my daughter as trustee. The living trust agreement listed me as grantor and beneficiary, which sounds nice until you look at the section that gives the trustee powers any car thief would envy. Somewhere upstairs, something heavy fell. I snapped 2 photos of each document front and back with my phone and sent them to Frank with the word, "Well?" He wrote back, "Do not sign anything. Smile a lot. And if you can, pretend to nap this afternoon." "Pretend?" I asked. "People do their worst work when they think you're asleep," he wrote. "And if they're smart, they'll test you before they push." I poured myself a glass of water. I put a lemon wedge on the rim like I was a woman in a commercial. I sat on the sofa and tried to watch a show about real estate that made a joke of everything I knew to be hard. And then I kicked off my shoes and lay back with one arm over my eyes and waited to be the sort of mother who taught herself to breathe quietly enough to hear other people's plans. Somewhere near the kitchen, shoes scuffed. A cabinet door opened. The refrigerator hummed in the way of machines that need you more than you need them. A step hesitated outside the doorway, then came in like a man uninvited. There is a sound a person makes when he steps closer to a sleeping woman he is about to harm. It is a smaller sound than you want to believe, and I hope you never have to learn it. Fingers brushed my sweater pocket. The pantry bottle moved. I kept my arm over my eyes. I slept like an actress who knows the lines, until the front door opened and closed and car tires spit gravel, and the house took a breath of relief loud enough to wake a saint. That evening, we sat on the dock and took a photo for a woman in the cabin 2 down who asked if we were a family celebrating something. Derek said yes. Ava said yes. I said yes. Because what else do you call it when 3 people are about to do something they will remember for the rest of their lives? Ava handed me a glass of wine. I raised it to my lips and pretended to sip. My husband used to joke that nurses and bartenders have a private religion. They know who should not be drinking, and they hear confessions anyway. I set the glass on the bench, and then I accidentally knocked it into the water with my elbow. We watched the red sink slowly, like blood washing off a white coat. "You're jumpy," Ava said. "It's not the wine," I said. "It's the lake." The truth is, I have always preferred oceans to lakes. An ocean will tell you fairly quickly if it intends to kill you. Lakes are quieter, and I do not trust quiet things with edges. We ate steak and salad and the kind of chocolate cake that tells a story about who you think you are. We did not talk about papers. We did not talk about retirement. We did not talk about the note from the bank that came to my house in an envelope addressed to my daughter, which I had not opened because I still believed in envelopes that weren't meant for me. When it was late enough that the stars began to show their backbone, I excused myself and went to the downstairs bathroom. I took 2 of my actual pills with tap water I had seen come out of an actual faucet, and then I went out the back door and stood on the deck listening to the night. Across the cove, a porch light flicked on. Nora stepped outside with her camera and took one long photo of the sky. It made a sound that reminded me of an animal settling into sleep. I texted Frank. They swapped my meds with a look-alike. He wrote back, "Keep your actual pills close. Also take photos of the pills in the other bottle. Put a quarter next to them for scale. Do not take anything that touches your lips unless you personally opened it." "Do you always talk to people like they are about to be in a true crime episode?" I wrote. "Yes," he wrote. "It saves time." "Where are you?" I asked him. "On my couch with the Knicks game muted," he wrote. "On my laptop with the county records. On my second phone with a guy who knows your charming son-in-law's charming bookie." "Derek gambles?" I asked, and you might wonder why I would ask a question when I already knew the answer. We ask for the truth we already know because hearing it out loud gives shape to the monster under the bed. "More like hemorrhages," he wrote. "I'll explain tomorrow." I slept with my phone under my pillow and my pocket knife in the drawer of the nightstand, and I dreamed of docks with too many bolts and not enough belief. In the morning, I woke to rain. It made a private music on the roof and turned the lake into static. Derek was already dressed, a sweater over a collared shirt, jeans that probably cost more than my first car. Ava came downstairs in leggings and a sweatshirt she'd bought from a gym she doesn't go to anymore. She had that look on her face she used to have before standardized tests, focused, flattened, furious at the questions for existing. "Coffee?" I asked. "In a minute," she said. There's something we should take care of while we're fresh. It's basic paperwork, Mom, so I can help you when you need someone to sit on hold with insurance. Don't look so pale. You always say you hate the phone." I smiled like I was a woman who'd been begged for a favor, and not like I'd just been told it would be easier for everyone if I'd sign away my life. "Let's look," I said. We sat at the island. The lilies drooped like they'd lost interest in us. Derek placed the envelope on the counter with the ceremony of a man who believes paper is power. He positioned the trust on top like a dessert menu. He put a pen near my hand that was heavy in the way of pens men give other men to convince them to marry their own bad decisions. "We're doing this so you don't have to worry," he said. This is so you can breathe." I read the first page. I read the second. I read the section that gave Ava the right to sell before I die, the right to invest in ways I would never, the right to move money where I could not follow it, the right to decide when to stop heroic measures should a day arrive where I become a burden described as a person. I read, and I read, and I looked up at my daughter whose hands trembled the slightest bit, and I heard my own voice say, lightly, like a woman who spills sugar and laughs, "Where's the notary?" "Coming this afternoon," Derek said quickly. "But we can get everything ready, and he just witnesses the signatures. Very easy, streamlined, efficient." "I like that word," I said, "efficient." "You always did," Ava said, and she was trying to make it a joke, but it came out like a prayer. "I want to call Frank," I said, "just to ask if there's anything we should add to keep things clean. He knows about these things." He did not, as far as they knew. He knew about blood. He knew about men who disappeared in the sort of leaving that requires topsoil. He knew about the way people lie when they're most afraid of the truth that's already knocking. But he did not know about trusts and deeds and the language of things that are stolen politely. Derek's smile flickered on and off. "You don't need to bring a third party into this, Helen. We're family." "Exactly," I said. "Which is why I expect you to understand that I like an extra set of eyes when I read things that have my name on them. It's only decent." Ava said, "Mom, we already postponed this once, and the notary charges for cancellations, and we don't want to waste money you'll need later, and if we drag this out, it'll only make it harder." "I didn't ask to postpone," I said. "I asked to add a phone call. There's a difference." "I'll reschedule the notary," Derek said, too quickly. Why don't we all just take a breath?" He took the papers and returned them to the envelope and put the envelope back into the drawer. He closed the drawer like a man shutting a lid on something that smells. He looked at me and his face was a careful mask. "You trust me, right?" he asked. It was not a question. It was a stage direction. I took a deep breath and remembered the sound of my daughter's voice on my porch. "Of course," I said, and my mouth tasted like copper. They made a show of being busy after that. Ava found a playlist for Rain. Derek found a sports channel. I found a dish towel to fold and fold again until I wanted to scream. I excused myself and went outside with a rain jacket on, where I stood on the deck and watched the water and tried not to think about how patient a lake can be. "Pretty, isn't it?" Nora called from under her umbrella. "Pretty, and a little murderous in the wrong shoes." Accurate, I said, and it surprised me how quickly I moved toward her voice. We stood under the small overhang of her cabin's porch, Jasper shaking rain onto both of us. You rent this place often? I asked. Enough to know the storm paths and the property lines, she said with a grin, and enough to know when somebody's pretending the weather is all they're worried about. I looked at her camera. She looked at my hands. You don't have to tell me anything, she said. I am, as they say, a woman minding her business. But if anyone ever asks you to sign something on a day when the sky looks like this, say you don't sign in the rain. It smudges. I laughed, and then to my surprise, I kept going until my eyes watered. Do you believe in premonitions? I asked when I could speak again. I believe in women who know the sound of their own heart, she said softly. I believe in dogs who refuse to go inside when something bad is about to walk down the road, and I believe in cameras. Cameras? She lifted her Nikon slightly. Sometimes trouble tells the truth when it thinks it won't be asked to. I told her the bare minimum, a weekend for a woman who hates surprises, papers that couldn't wait, a daughter who had learned to rush, a man who could not stop tapping his thumb against the table while he smiled. Nora listened like a person taking dictation for a prayer. When I finished, she said, If you want a spare human, I know how to hold a phone steady, and I know a sheriff who hates men with good hair. I already have one of those, I said. The sheriff, not the hair. I gave her Frank's name. She said it like she'd heard it before. It's a small world when you need a man who will show up without asking why. Back at the house, the notary was rescheduled until Sunday morning. Derek was gracious, or he was pretending to be a man who knows that success does not like eagerness. Ava was careful with me, like I was a slippery package she had to hold, but wasn't sure how to open without breaking. By late afternoon, the rain lightened to a spit. We decided to stretch our legs. The three of us walked the path around the cove in a triangle that would never be equilateral again. We passed Nora's cabin. She waved without calling out. Jasper considered joining us, then decided we were not yet worth the energy. We passed a small wooden sign that said deep water, no diving. We passed two teenage boys trying to get a drone unstuck from a pine. On the far side of the cove, a little motorboat nudged a floating buoy like it had a secret to tell. On the way back, we stepped onto our dock. The boards were damp, but not slick. The ladder had a new rope tied around it, a little too neatly. I moved my foot near it and stepped away. I looked at the bench and noticed two tiny carved initials in the far corner, C and L. I wondered how old you had to be to believe carving your name into wood could make anything last. The lake was stocked this spring, Derek said. Come out tonight with me, Helen. I'll bring the lantern. We'll catch something worth eating. I thought we brought the steaks, I said. We did, he said, and the smile he made did not reach his eyes. Another time, I said. I have a headache. It was true. It was also a code I would use for the rest of the weekend to say, I will not be alone with you near the edge of anything. I excused myself and walked the path around the cove. The air was warm and felt like a damp hand on the back of my neck. At Nora's cabin, Jasper put his head in my lap with the authority of a therapist who has seen this all before. Frank sat at the small table by the window, a baseball cap pulled low, forearms like evidence. Another man stood behind him who looked like he had been born in a uniform. Mrs. Reed, he said, and held out a badge. Bennett, Sheriff's Office, friend of Mr. Mason. I baked cookies, Nora said, putting down a plate of store-bought cookies because even good women get to lie about baking when light is short. We're not going to let anyone put you near that water without all of us watching. Frank pointed to a small transmitter with a blinking blue light. You press this, he said. It sends me a text and pings Bennett's radio. It's faster than calling. If anyone enters your room when you're not in it, we'll know. If anyone's on your deck for more than 10 seconds, we'll know. How? I asked, because I have learned to demand explanations for machines that insist on helping me. Nora tapped her camera case. He taught me to use a motion sensor last year because a black bear thought our trash looked like a wedding buffet. Turns out men are less tidy than bears, easier to film. We made a plan, and if you have ever made a plan to catch someone doing something they think they can get away with, you know it is both a relief and a small violence. It asks you to believe a bad thing will happen. It asks you to tell the truth with a camera. It asks you to hold still. At 4, the sky did what skies do when they want to complicate an afternoon. It cleared fast to a glittering blue, and then built a band of dark in the west the way a man builds a case against you when he's already decided the verdict. Derek checked his phone too many times. Ava went quiet the way she did when she was a teenager, and the only way to get her attention was to turn off the Wi-Fi. I folded towels. Cole came by to fix a squeaky hinge, which meant he wanted a reason to be in the house without the causality of one. He nodded at me, and I nodded back, and we understood each other perfectly. At 7:30, the light did that golden thing Instagram pretends it invented. Ava stood in the doorway with her hair lit up like confession. "Ready?" she asked. "I will be in 5, I said. "Bathroom." I took the transmitter. I moved quietly across the hallway. Downstairs, I opened my bedroom window and propped the screen with an old book. I closed my door and locked it. Then I walked into the kitchen and said, "I'll meet you on the dock," and took the back stairs from the laundry room to the side yard like a teenager sneaking to meet a boy whose parents do not know she exists. From the cove path, I watched my daughter and her husband step onto the dock and arrange themselves for a picture that someone else would take. He put a lantern on the bench. She angled her face away from the camera just enough to look beautiful and innocent. Then he looked up at the house and frowned and muttered something about the generator. He climbed the stairs, stomped past the back door, went into the hall, opened the closet, and restarted the machine with a practiced hand. Back at the dock, he patted the ladder, smiled, took 2 steps closer to my daughter, and said something that made her laugh. The thing about watching people you love while they do something unforgivable is that you cannot unknow either thing about them. My daughter's laugh still sounds like a jar lid finally loosened. I moved along the path to the boathouse at the far side of our yard. Frank and Bennett were already there, behind the half-open door. Nora stood a little way back with Jasper's head resting against her thigh. Bennett peered through a gap in the wood with binoculars like a man pretending patience. Frank held his phone up and showed me the screen. The motion sensor near the deck had lit up twice in the last hour. The one near the dock ladder flashed red. "It's happening now," he said softly. "We'll wait until he touches her. Then we move." "I don't want them to touch," I said. "I want them to stop." "They won't," he said. "People like this always have to prove their math adds up." I pressed the transmitter. Somewhere a text message pinged. Somewhere a patrol car began a low, polite conversation with a road no one had named. On the dock, Derek handed my daughter a glass of wine and gestured toward the ladder. "Hold it," he said. "Right there, just like that." "What is this?" she asked, and laughed again like she wanted to pretend she didn't know. "Insurance," he said. He stepped behind her and put one hand on her arm and the other on the ladder rope and leaned forward a fraction. And you might think a fraction isn't much, but a fraction is the difference between a dock standing and a dock giving way, between a breath and a last breath, between a life and the story people tell about it afterward. He leaned. He whispered something. She went still. For one long second, the 3 of us did not exist in the same moral universe. "Now," Bennett said. They moved like men who had waited their whole lives for someone to do the wrong thing at the right time. Bennett stepped out of the boathouse and onto the grass, voice already firm, already formal. "Sheriff's office," he called, though he didn't need to say it. You can hear the law in a man's voice when it shows up. "Hands where I can see them." Derek jerked backward, his face rearranging itself into a version of a man who would say, with great confidence, that we had misunderstood, that he had slipped, that the ladder had shifted, that gravity is unfair to good people. He lifted both hands, palms open, like he was showing us there was nothing there, as if fingerprints were not made in moments like this. Ava turned slowly, her mouth an O, her eyes wide in the way of a child who has found the monster at the end of the story and realizes too late that the monster had her father's watch. Bennett walked toward them across the lawn. 2 deputies appeared at the top of the stairs like ghosts with good posture. Frank kept filming. Nora stood with Jasper, her hand so still on his head it looked like a prayer made of bone. "What? What are you doing?" Derek demanded. "We're on private property. You can't just—" "Got a call about a possible gas leak," Bennett said mildly, coming to a stop 2 feet from the bench. "We're checking on the generator. Also, sir, I'm going to need you to step off the dock." "I didn't call you," Derek said. "I did," I said from the top of the stairs. My voice sounded calm. I do not know how. "I thought someone might get hurt tonight." Ava's face changed then. Not slowly, not like a cloud moving. It changed the way a door slams. She looked at me like I was the betrayal. It amazed me, and then it did not. People tell you who they are when they are afraid. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," Derek said. "We're taking pictures. It's a family thing. It's a... Helen, tell them." "I will," I said. "I will tell them everything." Bennett stepped onto the dock. He turned his head slightly, like a man listening to a voice only he could hear. He nodded. Once. He pointed to the ladder rope with his chin. "Sir," he said, "step back." Derek did not move. "Sir," Bennett repeated, "step back." He took one step. His eyes flicked to my daughter's face. She did not look at him. She looked at me. The car with the notary pulled up just then. He was early. He stood at the top of the driveway in a bad suit, holding a briefcase like he'd wandered into the wrong play. He said, "I'm looking for..." "You can go home," I told him. And I used a voice that I had not heard since my husband died. A voice that believes it can still stop time. "We won't be needing you." "What is this?" Ava whispered. "Mom, what are you doing?" "What I should have done the first time I heard you whisper plans for my life on my porch," I said. "I'm saying no." The deputies stepped onto the dock. Bennett crouched and touched the rope. He looked up at Derek with eyes like a man examining a choice he had already seen too many times. "You know what happens if this ladder goes," he said quietly. "You've been out here long enough to have rehearsed it. You wrote it down on your phone." "What?" Derek snapped. "Delete doesn't mean gone," Frank said from the lawn. He held up his phone. "We have your texts, the ones where you write, and I quote, 'Tonight is ideal. She signs or she swims.' You're less poetic than you think." "That's illegal," Derek said. "You can't just..." "You text on a Wi-Fi that isn't yours," Nora said, like it bored her, and it did. "Bless your heart." Ava stood very still. Her shoulders were straight. She did not cry. She looked at me and opened and closed her mouth. For a second, I thought she might say sorry. For a second, I thought she might tell me the truth the way a woman says something when she has decided she cannot live with herself if she does not. Instead, she said softly, like a woman giving the wrong medication to a stranger, "We could have had it all, Mom." "We still can," I said. "You somewhere, me somewhere else." Derek tried one more smile. "Helen," he said, "you know me. I would never. This is..." "You would," I said. "You did. The only question left is whether you'll tell yourself a version of this story where you were cornered or misunderstood or forced, or whether you'll tell yourself the truth. I prefer the truth. It sleeps better." The deputies took him then. It looked ordinary. Hands behind back, metal in air, the sound of a man who believes he will talk his way out of a thing and discovers too late that talk is not a universal solvent. Bennett asked Ava to step aside. She did and tried to touch me as she passed. I could not make my body allow it. The rest of the evening moved the way evenings do when everything changes and nothing has. Lights, notes, a neighbor at the top of the drive with a mouthful of questions. The notary standing there like a man chosen last at a dance. Cole appeared once and then disappeared again in that way men do when the story stops needing them. At the station, Bennett took my statement. Frank handed over the video. The footage from the night before made a sound in my throat I did not recognize when we watched it. The angle was good. The man in the beanie was visible enough to compare. He had a small scar on his right hand. He had a way of holding a wrench like a conductor's baton. The screws came out like they'd been waiting for a cue. Ava did not speak to me in the station. She stared at the wall. She asked for a glass of water and did not drink it. When I stood up to leave, she said my name and I turned and she said, small and furious, "You didn't have to make it public." "I tried to make it private," I said. "You made it a crime." Frank walked me to his car. "You won't be sleeping at the lake tonight," he said, like we were two people making a plan about something much simpler than everything. "Come to Nora's. She has 2 bedrooms." "I'll take my room with the window," I said. "The lake can keep its dock." The trial did not happen for months. In between, the world continued. I canceled my cable subscription and found I did not miss it. I sold the house I could no longer walk through without seeing a light switch any clearer. I moved to a smaller place with a front window that looked out on a street where children still ride bikes and argue about whose turn it is to crash into the curb. I changed my number and then changed it back because it felt like erasing myself to spite someone else. Some afternoons I drove to Cedar Lake and walked the path with Jasper and Nora and a new portable camera I didn't know how to use yet and didn't need. I looked at the dock. It had been repaired. It shone like a reformed idea. Sometimes people put flowers at the end of it, the way they do when a place looks like the sort of place where something terrible has happened, whether or not it did. I read every card. There were always two kinds. The first were simple, for those who lost. The second were more elaborate, in memory of someone we loved. Those second ones reminded me that people insist on believing what they need to believe. In the mornings, I went to a community center where women my age came to drink coffee and learn to use email and sometimes say out loud the thing they could not tell their sons. We made a program there for older adults whose children had learned how to forge. We called it Paper with Eyes on It. We taught each other how to ask, why so fast, and who benefits, and the most important question of all, what happens if I say no? On the day Ava testified, she wore a plain dress, and in the hallway we passed close enough to smell each other's perfume. She said my name softly. It is a strange thing to live long enough to become the woman who cannot comfort her own child in public. I looked at her and saw the baby she had been, red and furious, mouth a perfect O. If I am confessing everything, I will tell you I wanted to hold her. I will also tell you I did not take one step in her direction. On the stand, she answered carefully and sometimes looked at me like the room might forgive us both if I only nodded. Derek's attorney asked her questions in a voice that tried to sound like a man who believes in her. She did not cry. She did not say what I thought she might say. She did not admit. She did not deny. She pointed at text messages that looked like a man writing to a woman who had convinced herself the weather would stay good if she planned hard enough. The jury did what juries do when a case has both a camera and a mother. They convicted him. Attempted murder, conspiracy, fraud, all the words that sound dry until you hold them next to the way a body falls. The judge sentenced him to 18 years. The math felt too neat and too messy all at once. The time won't fix what was broken. The time might make everything else possible. Ava took a plea for her part. 8 years. When she heard the number, she went very still, like a person counting backward from 10 to keep from screaming. I did not look away. There is a cruelty to a mother's love you do not understand until your child asks you with her eyes to please rescue her, and you know that to do so would unspool the small, hard work of every woman who will come after her with a daughter who decides she needs to choose a survival that is not her mother's. The day after the sentencing, I drove to the lake and sat with Nora on her porch. Jasper put his head on my feet. The sky had that clean look it gets after a storm. The water murmured against the shore like a voice that promises new chances for people who can swim. "What now?" Nora asked. "I'm going dancing," I said. She laughed. "What kind?" "All of them," I said. I signed up for a salsa class at the Y and spent the first week stepping on a man's toes who introduced himself as Louis and told me my sense of rhythm was the sort of thing men go to war for. He had a smile that could fix dentures. We ate pie at the diner after class and talked about knees and radios and the best way to make coffee if you don't own a machine. I went back to the center and helped a woman named Mildred put her affairs into a binder color-coded by urgency. "My son keeps telling me it's time," she said. "Time for what?" I asked. "Time for him to practice being in charge," she answered, and we both laughed, and then she cried. And I did too, and we called her lawyer and said we would bring cookies to make the meeting feel less like a surrender and more like a plan. In late spring, I bought a small camper with curtains I sewed myself badly. I drove it to the Adirondacks and sat beside a different lake and read a book whose last chapter I refused to reach for 3 days, because there is a pleasure in postponing the end when the story is good. I learned to back the little rig into parking spots without swearing. A teenage girl at a gas station told me I was goals, which I had to Google, and when I learned what it meant, my heart felt like it used to when my husband would put his hand on the back of my neck and let his thumb rest there the way a person rests when they know they are allowed to. Sometimes, at night, when the house was quiet and whatever show I'd been pretending to watch had given up, I would put on the sweater I wore the day my daughter surprised me with that weekend, the one that smelled like rain if I let myself go far enough back, and I would say out loud the thing I wish someone had said to me when I was 30 and thought love meant never asking a hard question. I would say, Helen, you are allowed to be the kind of woman whose kindness does not sign its own name on blank lines. I know what you want to ask. You want to ask if I visit my daughter in prison, if I write to her, if she writes back, if we will be a family again in the way of families on billboards, if I pray for her, if I forgive. I will tell you this. I told her at the end of the trial that I would write when I had something to say that didn't apologize for the fact that I refused to apologize for living. I told her that I would be here when she came out, but not in the house where the lilies gave up. I told her that love without a spine is sympathy, not salvation. I told her that if she needed to relearn what yes and no mean, I would be here to practice with her. On the second anniversary of the weekend we survived, Nora and I drove to Cedar Lake with a thermos of coffee and a bag of donuts and stood on the public path and watched the water do the thing it does, which is to prove that nothing is ever the same and everything is. A boy in a red jacket ran onto the dock and his mother yelled for him to slow down, and he slowed the way children do by pretending to go even faster. He stopped at the end, sat, and put his feet in. He counted the ripples like they were hours. Do you ever regret, Nora asked softly, that you made it stop the way you did? With the cameras? With the deputies? Do you ever wonder what it would have been like to just leave? I thought about the sound the screw makes when it backs out of wood. I thought about the generator closet. I thought about the ladder with the neat rope tied around it, and the way Derek's hand tightened on my daughter's arm while he practiced smiling at a future he believed he could order by catalog. I thought about the way he leaned. No, I said, because leaving would have written the ending he wanted, and I am not done with my story yet. I tell you all this not because I want your sympathy, but because I want your ears. There will be a day when someone you love asks you to sign something because it will make everything easier. There will be a day when a person with good hair says the word streamlined like a benediction. There will be a day when you are tired and the lilies are drooping and the envelope is on the counter and you think, what could it hurt? On that day, I want you to hear a voice that might be mine. I want it to say, what happens if I say no? I want you to think about the dock and the ladder and the way ropes can look like neatness when they are knots. I want you to find a woman with a dog who knows the weather. I want you to invite the law to stand between you and whatever is pretending to be love on a night when the sky looks like surrender. And if your heart breaks, because hearts do, I want you to know that it will keep beating. It will, despite everything, keep doing the rude, generous thing a heart was built to do. The last time I saw Derek was in court when his attorney was still under the impression that a better tie might change the shape of a verdict. He did not look small. Men like him never do. He looked like a man who believes he will live forever. Maybe that is its own sentence. The last time I saw Ava was through glass, fingers pressed like a movie that embarrasses me now that I am old enough to love my mistakes in full daylight. She said, Mom, and I said, yes, and then neither of us had anything to add without changing everything we had managed to hold together with tape. I am not a woman with answers. I am not a saint. I am a retired nurse who knows the weight of a hand on a rail, the temperature of a room that wants you too much, the way a door can sound when it closes on something you no longer intend to carry. I am a mother. I am a friend. I am a woman who signed her name once on a page and then learned to read it out loud. I am a woman who does not sign for storms. I am a woman who, when asked to act surprised, decided instead to act. And if you ever find yourself on a dock anywhere with anybody wanting to trust the water, I hope you lean back enough to see the screws. I hope you step away when someone with expensive hair says, just a little closer. I hope you say politely and then not, no. I hope you give yourself away to no one and nothing that hasn't earned it. I hope you turn and run. I hope you call the person whose voice makes your body remember it can different. I hope you live. I hope you live and live and live. And then I hope you dance.